Welcome to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. In 2009, I was living in England, contemplating how to move to Canada. It dawned on me that after 2 years of teaching grades 7 through 9 in Mexico and England, that a master's degree in education could be a possible next step. I was admitted to the College of Education at the University of Saskatchewan. I moved to the province, learned a lot, had my worldviews challenged and molded, and wrote a thesis about the experiences of immigrant students in England, whom I could somewhat relate to, having been an immigrant myself for a few years. As I contemplated a return to my home state at the end of my master's, I felt as if I needed to have a plan in place upon returning to Missouri. I didn't go back and just see what happened, but instead I jumped into a PhD program at the University of Missouri in social studies education. I was unfamiliar with virtually all social studies education literature, and I found myself printing binders full of articles, buying books, receiving a stipend for TAing classes that I really had no business TAing, and doing my best to convince myself that I was a worthy scholar at age 27, despite having only 2 years teaching and 20 months as a master's student under my belt. I was immediately out of my league the second I stepped in front of an auditorium full of undergraduates to teach them about teaching. I immersed myself into the pervasive publish or perish mindset while doing my best to painstakingly write, edit, submit, revise, research, take classes, read, complete assignments, teach classes, observe, grade, and advise undergraduates in field teaching and writing, and generally try to stay sane. I learned about 6 months in that my problem in my PhD program was that I didn't really have an aim or a specific passion. Every book I read led me to think I was pursuing the wrong dissertation topic. It made me want to change my mind. Every discussion with my advisor, as caring and compassionate a mentor as I could hope for, led to despair on my part instead of excitement or motivation. I just felt like I didn't really want to be there. I didn't really love it or care about it, and I admitted to myself that I was floundering after about a year in the program. I hit the wall just before comprehensive exams. My wife and I welcomed our daughter into the world, and I was offered a job to teach English and religious studies at a local high school. I cleaned out my corner of our TA collective office space and practically ran from campus. As a high school teacher, I found my passion teaching religious studies while in the field doing what I was supposed to be doing, teaching kids. It was in the classroom that my creativity and passions bore fruit, rewards, experiences, and creative windfalls. After I left, I emerged with a skeptical view of who should go to graduate school to pursue a doctorate. I felt too many were going in for the wrong reasons, just like I did. I began reading what came to be called Quit Lit, and I started following the voices of folks who were noticing some things going wrong in higher education. I watched brilliant and meticulously trained historians, teacher education, and humanities PhDs land in adjunct jobs, spend thousands in travel expenses to go on the job market or conferences only to come up short, and I knew that that would have been me too. People who were far more skilled, far more focused, and praised for their scholarship seemed to be struggling on the job market, and I knew I'd made the right choice for me. I had a conversation like this 2 nights ago. This podcast episode is me trying to contribute a tiny piece to the Quit Lit phenomenon. A direct inspiration for this episode is episode 37 of the podcast, The Way of Improvement Leads Home, featuring a discussion between Dr. Aaron Bartram and Dr. John Fia, as well as Dr. Bartram's incredible series of articles on her website, aaronbartram.com. This brings me to today's topic with my friend Michael Van Hartingsveldt. Michael has been on the show 2 times previously. On episode 47, he talked to me about his job working as a scholar of Japanese Buddhist art for the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. On episode 92, he helped me introduce the topic of Gyotaku in my episode on Gyotaku art with Dwight Huang. When Michael and I spoke about Dwight and Gyotaku, he mentioned to me off-air he was about to start a PhD, and all of my warning signs went up. Michael has an awesome job. He is an up-and-coming name in the world of art in Los Angeles. He's in demand as a writer and events planner, and from my perspective, he's already doing the work he was meant to do. So why leave his job at a great museum where he's building a network and plunge into the humanities world in higher education in pursuit of a PhD, which when completed may land him right back in the job he's already doing? These questions swirled in my head, and I wanted to grill him and plead him to listen to my reason and logic for why he should reconsider jumping ship on his job to do a PhD. One thing to note is that we had a tiny recording glitch during the conversation where Michael and I accidentally talked over each other a few times. I did my best to take as much of that out as I could in the editing process, so please accept my apology for the short moments where that occurs. So, the question of today is, should you go to grad school? I should not have in 2009, most likely. But maybe Michael should today. I'm not sure. I took the tact of approaching this conversation by trying to sort of talk him out of doing a PhD and continue his education while on the job, and we had a lot of fun. So please enjoy this conversation with my friend, Michael Van Hartingsveldt. Michael, we're here today to talk about PhD programs in the humanities, in art, and all of that great world that has benefited our lives so much through all the books and the art and the museums and the literature that we've read and seen and consumed in our lives. Tell me, just really quick, what your education trajectory has been
I went to a private elementary school and high school. When I graduated from there, I went to a private university where I majored in English language and literature, and I did a art history minor. From there, I moved to South Korea for 5 years, where I ended up teaching English because I had no other real job prospects. From there, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give doing a master's a try. And I had always had this interest in Asian art, but I never really knew how to get there because the place I grew up was fairly whitewashed. It was a place where I didn't have a lot of exposure to Asian art, Asian culture. And so I ended up not really following that. But then when I decided to go for my master's program, I thought, you know what, maybe this is the time to try to get into Asian art, get into history of Asian culture as well. And I applied to a program in Southern California at the Claremont Graduate University. And I got into a joint program between CGU and the Sotheby's Institute of Art. And they had a concentration on East Asian art and its markets. And I thought, you know what, this is great. I'm going to drop into that. So I applied. I got accepted. Thankfully, because my undergraduate degree, I had a pretty terrible GPA. And I got into the program, thankfully, and I made my way through it. I forged forward. I made the connections I needed to, and I worked as hard as I could. And I ended up graduating top of my class, which was pretty amazing. I met the curator of Japanese art at LACMA, Hollis Goodall, and she took me under her wing. And she was like, yeah, you can work with me, you can study under me, and you can really start in earnest studying Asian art, Japanese art specifically. And so I've been doing that for the past almost 2.5 years now. And that led to me becoming a research scholar of Japanese art at LACMA, not even just by the jobs that I do, but by official title. And then it also led me to being involved as a collections management technician with the Asian departments. So much so that I'm kind of the de facto lead technician on all the Asian departments there.
Okay, so real quick, my backstory is that I went to public elementary, public high school, University of Missouri for undergrad, majored in education because my entire life I'd been told, you're going to be a great teacher one day. So like my entire life felt like my destiny was almost like preordained for me. And so then I went and taught in Mexico. I went to a job fair in Iowa, landed a job for like $18,000 a year teaching English and history in north central Mexico. So I went down there, and then I went and got a job in England teaching history at a public school in England. And then kind of like you, I was like, I'm going to give a master's a try. And I wound up at the University of Saskatchewan in Western Canada, and did a master's there in education, and I totally just like made up what I wanted to focus on in my research. Like they showed up and like, what do you want to focus on? And I was like, academic tracking. And so like, I haphazardly went through a master's program with kind of a focus, but like I look back at my thesis now, and I'm like, man, there's like 30 sources in my citations. Like I was not immersing myself in the literature in a way that you might expect in grad school. And then like I wound up applying for a PhD program back at my alma mater at the University of Missouri, and like got accepted, but it was in social studies education. And I just like totally had no clue what I was getting myself into. Mm-hmm. I was absolutely like a rudderless ship. Just, I guess I'll go to Columbia, Missouri and be in this PhD program with no like focus, trajectory, idea of what I want to focus on. I'm just going to be like this social studies education PhD student. Clueless. Completely clueless. And so when you told me recently that you were going to potentially do a PhD soon, I was really piqued because like I've been in that world, and I did not finish my PhD. I managed to eke through for 2 years and had some great experiences, but like I was like floating in this like black hole of uncertainty, essentially. So that is like something that whenever people tell me they're going to do a PhD, it's like I don't know how to feel about it, because it could be so great or it could be so terrible. So, what do you think about that? Like, how did you start to think about doing a PhD program?
When I was 11 years old, and I think I've mentioned this before on your podcast, when I was 11 years old, I first encountered Asian art, and that was a samurai exhibition at the Royal Ontario Museum. I believe it was at the Royal Ontario Museum, and I saw the samurai exhibition, and I fell in love with the aesthetic, the fearsome aesthetic. And I thought, you know what, someday I do want to be a professor. I don't know of what yet, but I want to be a professor. And then I thought, or I want to be a curator. Mm-hmm. Maybe I want to be a professor and a curator, or maybe a curator and a professor. I wonder which one I'm going to give more weight to. And I had already had those kind of delusions of grandeur way back when. And I've been thinking, even up till now, I still want to be a professor. I still want to be a curator. And I'm still flip-flopping about which one I really want to do. But the one common thread between the two is that you need a PhD to really be respected and to really move forward in the field.
To be either one of them?
To be either one of them. If you want to be a university professor, a lot of the job like the job sites and a lot of the job postings, they ask for somebody with a PhD. A lot of curatorial positions, they say maybe a master's can be considered based on experience, but we really want a PhD. So if you want to be a curator or a professor, a PhD is definitely something. It will give you a leg up.
Okay. So really quick, what is your like day-to-day life like right now?
I've got my main job, but then I also have other side jobs that I'm working because number one, I'm living in Los Angeles. Number two, I need to be able to afford rent. And number three, I'm in the arts. So that right there should tell you a little bit about how my work schedule is going to be a little bit different than other people's. The first thing I do in the morning is I am kind of getting ready for the day. So I am making my meals, breakfast, lunch, and kind of planning what I want to do for supper. Then I do a little bit of replying to emails first thing in the morning. I do a little bit of just kind of light research, some light reading. Sometimes I'll sit down and I'll just kind of read a novel, a couple pages of a novel, just to get my brain working, ready for to be productive during the day. I am out of the house door by about 6:30. I am at work at about 7 in the morning. I am working my full-time position, which is as collections management technician. I am doing that from about 7 in the morning till about 6 at night. So it's about a 10-hour day. I take a short lunch because I want to get as much packed into a single day as possible. During my break times and during my lunch time, I'm either meeting somebody that could maybe move me forward in my career, or I am responding to more emails or putting out kind of cold feelers for potential projects. And then when I get home at about 6:30ish, I am kind of usually thinking about supper around that time, get supper ready, and then after that I sit down, read maybe a chapter of a novel to kind of let my brain relax after the day. And then I sit down and then I work on all of my extracurricular projects.
How long have you been doing this?
I would say about 2.5 years.
Okay, so are you starting to feel kind of tired and kind of like
rejuvenated
by the
really?
By the pace of it all?
I love what I do.
Okay,
I'm handling new types of art every single day. I'm learning about new types of art every single day. I am loving the books that I'm reading right now, both my academic books and the novels that I'm reading. I am eating healthier than I've ever eaten before. I'm getting more physical exercise than I've ever gotten before in my life. It's a pretty amazing schedule. Even though I'm working long hours, I'm really loving what I'm doing. And that's kind of what's fed into this decision to do a PhD.
Okay, so you have this life that you've established in LA. You've built these connections. You've got these people that you know. You have a reputation that you are building in a specific place in the world. So how did you decide which programs that you were going to apply to?
I looked at the people who were studying the same field, a similar field to what I wanted to study. And I was looking at also the reputation that they had with their students, and I was looking at the connection and the way they supported their students after that. And I looked at a bunch of different schools. I don't want to name them all by name, but I ultimately decided on the University of Kansas because Sherry Fowler, who is the professor of Japanese art there, she specializes in Buddhist art. I want to go into Buddhist art, and it's really kind of like a match made in heaven in my mind. Not only that, but you're from Missouri, and you know Kansas City, and you know the Nelson Atkins. Nelson Atkins has got one of the best collections of Asian art in all the United States. The Spencer Art Museum, which is the on-campus museum at the University of Kansas, they have a sizable and a pretty impressive Asian art collection as well. And having tools like that and having the actual art on hand that I can study in situ, to me, is a very, very promising prospect.
Okay, so your application process is very, very purposeful, which is the diametrically opposed opposite of mine, where I just guessed where I was going to apply. I did that because, I was feeling some pressure from home, from family members back home to move back home, to do all these things. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this? So I essentially went into a PhD program for, in my view now, looking back on it, a fairly wrong reason to do it. Do you feel like you have the specific purpose and research emphasis in mind going in that maybe I lack?
I have this almost unhealthy obsession with wrathful deities in Buddhism. Fudo Myo is one that comes to mind. We've discussed him at length at multiple times. And I really do want to focus my research on that sort of area of Buddhism, especially as represented in art. But what I also want to do as I go into this program is I also want to get a very well-rounded perspective. I do have to complete a master's degree before I segue into the PhD program. So what I'm thinking of doing, and this isn't something I have really discussed with my advisor yet, but I would like to see if there's a way that I can use the electives for my art history degree, master's degree, to also get a dual master's basically in East Asian religion. So getting a dual master's degree in religion and art history, both from East Asia. And that way I think I would have an even more well-rounded approach to what my dissertation will ultimately be.
Well, yeah, and then like looking down the line, when you think about like opportunities for actual professorships, assistant professorships, you would be able to apply to art departments, but also to religious studies departments. So what kind of like career postings might you see for somebody listening? Like what does somebody with a PhD in Japanese Buddhist art and religious studies and East Asian art, what does what does the job
I belong to a couple East Asian art forums, and there are job postings coming up almost every other day. All around, they're available in the United States, in Canada. There's a few positions in South America that have opened up at universities there, mostly in Europe and North America, though. Okay.
So, you know, the $1,000,000 question to me is why leave this good job that you have, that you love, that you declare that you love? Why do that? Why not stay there and try to pursue a PhD where you are, like on the side, and maybe try to take on some kind of reduced role at your current position and just kind of stay put?
So this is something that I've really been struggling with, and it's been weighing heavy on my mind, weighing heavy on my heart, and it's something that I've really been meditating on and really thinking about. And, you know, there's a reason I've got gray hairs on the side of my head, and this is the exact reason. I think to be able to adequately pour myself into my studies, I need to be in a place where I don't have opportunity like I do here. And the reason I say that is I had mentioned extracurricular projects before. I am currently working on 2 exhibition ideas concurrently. My most recent exhibition just opened up at the Japan Foundation Los Angeles just a couple weeks ago. And already I'm starting to focus on other curatorial projects. I accompany Dwight Huang, who you had in a previous episode and who I did the introduction for. I accompany him to many, many different places, almost acting as his mouthpiece. So while he's demonstrating his Gyotaku art, I am his mouthpiece. I am presenting this process. I'm giving the historical context. All of these things distract me, and I hate to say it, but they are distractions from really focusing on the academic side of what I need to study. Even though they give me excuses and reasons to dig deep and research deeply these topics, they also serve as something that would potentially hold me back from pouring my utmost into my studies and finishing the coursework and, hopefully achieving that perfect 4.0.
But what if they are the very relationships that could see you through the
I already have the plan to return here at least once a month, just to kind of keep those relationships strong and to see what kind of stuff I can do for them on a return visit, even if it's over a weekend, if there's things that I can do with them or things I can do for them. I will be looking for ways to maintain these relationships and perhaps even further these relationships while I have even more contacts through the school network and the alumni network.
Okay. So, if you pursue one opportunity, that means sacrificing other opportunities. Yep. So you sacrifice the current position for the PhD program. working with the specialist at KU near Kansas City. And, obviously with your outgoing personality and just the kind of person you are, you're going to build those kinds of relationships again, just in a different part of the country as well. So you're potentially going to expand your cross-country network as well, right? So here's my question. If you leave this job for a PhD, what's the chance that you will wind up right back in the position that you're in now, doing the same kind of job that you currently have without a PhD? Because, there's a lot of people that graduate every year with PhDs that become underemployed.
A likelihood of it, but I wouldn't call it a danger because, I work I work at a museum, but I am getting paid $55,000 a year, which is no small. It's not chump change, especially in the arts, field. Right. That's a lot of money to give up, but it's a good safety net to fall back on if things, even if I do get my PhD, even if I do get my MAs, I can still, that's not a small amount of money to fall back on. And I've really made a good connection with people and really made a good impression on the people at LACMA. And so much so that they said, well, if you are finished and you need a job, we have a job for you.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's pretty cool. So I want to know about what kind of skills you think that you can get doing the PhD that you cannot acquire unless you go into that PhD. You mentioned all these other they're sort of distracting activities that you do that also sound very enriching and fulfilling. But what are you specifically going to gain skill-wise doing the PhD that you don't already have? Because you publish a lot, you teach a lot, you're in the world, you're working with art every day. What kind of skills do you think you're going to get in the PhD that you don't already?
My Japanese and my Korean language are elementary at best. I can read hiragana, I can read katakana, I can identify maybe about 100 kanji, and I can read Korean at an elementary level, but I am nowhere near proficient enough to be able to read a newspaper, or even less so, a textbook or an academic journal. And I really need I've tried tutors. I've tried to apply for language programs and everything like that. And I really need the rigors of a structured class where I won't get distracted by these other projects to really get my languages down. And my goal is to get both Japanese and Korean under my belt before I graduate.
I didn't know about this whole extra MA angle that you just threw at me. That's new. So what is the timeline for doing
about
this
3.5,
program?
4 years.
Because this is going to take
years.
That's all.
Because I'm going to be throwing in some extra credits. And I'm a workhorse. I love to put in efforts like that. So I don't know if I told you, but I did 2 thesis projects for my first master's degree. So both were papers of about 65 pages long. Both were researched. Both required a considerable amount of effort. And I feel like if I can do that while I am still interning full-time at LACMA and attending classes full-time, and working 20 hours a week just to be able to make ends meet. If I can do all that, I don't think a dual MA is going to be all that far off.
Okay, so now what I want to know is what potential pitfalls do you think may arise? Like, what could spring up in your way that would be an unforeseen obstacle?
I don't know if you're familiar with imposter syndrome. So it sounds like that we could be co-kings.
I'm the king of it.
I've got a serious imposter syndrome, a complex. So I feel like I'm surrounded by all these people. I'm surrounded by people who have called me a contemporary, or people that kind of turn to me for certain ideas when it comes to Buddhist art. They trust my input. They trust that the information that I'm giving is accurate. These lectures that I give, people hang on my every word, thinking that I know best. And there I am presenting everything like I do know best. And in the back of my head, it's like, you don't know best. And you're constantly doubting. And then after you give this big lecture and you hear lots of positive praise, lots of good words and like, great job, you know, you had me hook, line, and sinker on every word you spoke. You're a very good speaker. You are a good public speaker. I love the information you were able to provide. All these compliments that people pay you, you don't believe them. And you realize, no, I need to bury myself deeper in research. And I need to confirm everything that I say. And I need to make sure that what I said 10 minutes into the lecture that I gave, I need to check that detail to make sure that it actually is correct. And if it's not correct, I need to send out a message to everybody correcting what I said. And I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think the biggest danger for me is going to be doubting my own abilities and ultimately sabotaging myself.
So, do you have a history of self-sabotage?
Yes and no.
Like, do you think you might mess this up because of things that you've done in the past that you know,
yes
learn
and no.
from?
I'm going to say yes, the fear is there, but the track record is no, I won't. So one of the characteristics that my parents, who are Dutch, and I'm full blood Dutch, the thing that my parents always tell me is that if the Dutch aren't stubborn, they aren't anything. I am stubborn. I am bullheaded, and I forge. You know, I could feel completely useless. I could be completely down on myself. And then I will still force myself to finish something, and I will still forge forward to get that done. And even if the danger to sabotage myself is there, and even if the thoughts just tell me to quit, I am stubborn enough that I'll be like, no, I'm still going to finish it. It doesn't matter if it's good anymore. It just needs to be done. Yeah.
I mean, I've had friends that got C's in PhD program classes, but managed to crank out a publication that came out in like Teachers College Record or some like really fantastic journal that was really respected in my field, and no one looked at their grades. They just looked at the fact that they had that article in Teachers College Record. So, okay, now what I want to know is like, what happens if this 3.5 to 4 year program, see, my PhD program was going to be 4 years or 5 years, depending on how long it took to dissertate, but there are people that I was in a PhD program with in 2011 that are still attempting to dissertate. And, you know, that's 8 years later. So what happens if your timeline is underbaked?
I am also considering an ABD as being done with coursework. However long it takes me to finish my dissertation after that, my plan is to be doing the dissertation while I'm working full time. And there are a lot of institutions out there that will hire ABDs. Okay. And allow them to finish their dissertation while they are working full time. And so that's my plan. I want to get all my coursework done in that 3.5, 4 years. And then I want to be working full time at a place that will allow me to further study for my dissertation concurrently with the work that I'm completing for them.
Okay. Do you know about like the journals in what would be your field that are like the places where your contemporary peer scholars
Orientations is one of them.
To publish during your PhD
there's
program?
Ars Boudica, which is another one. That one I believe is still ongoing. I haven't checked lately. There are a couple other journals that come out of Japan that are dedicated strictly to Buddhist art. Beautiful illustrations, beautiful photographs in there. There are a series of books. There's Heibonsha, I believe they still publish. Brill still publishes a lot of Japanese culture and Japanese visual culture books. Shambhala is definitely a place. Stephen Addis, who used to teach at University of Kansas, He published a bunch of books through Shambhala.
Yeah, I think that Stephen Addis is actually in Virginia. I think that
Stephen
the person
Addis
you might be
used
thinking
to
of
be
is
at University
Stanley
of Kansas.
Lombardo.
Stanley Lombardo is the guy that's
okay,
at
so,
the Zen Center in Kansas, or in Lawrence.
Yeah, he's retired. He's retired now, but he's one of the masters over at the Kwamum School of Zen in Lawrence, Kansas, at the Kansas Zen Center. They're fantastic. So there's actually, there's a lot of amazing people in Lawrence. So have you gone there yet? Have you sat down in person with the folks that you would be studying under? Okay, so tell me about that meeting and how you walked away. I'd imagine that you walked away feeling really good about it if you decided that you were like, well, this is what I'm going to go through with. So tell me about that meeting
flew me
that
out,
kind of like convinced you.
to see the campus and to speak with everybody that would be I would be affiliating with, studying with, and everything. That was April 3rd and 4th of 2018. I went over. I didn't know what to expect. Landed at Kansas City. I hopped on a Lyft to go from Kansas City Airport all the way to Lawrence. And I was overwhelmed by how empty the roads were. Ride compared to Los Angeles. So that was my first thought. It's just like, oh, traffic moves so smoothly here. And the roads are smooth. They're not terrible condition. Got to the campus, beautiful buildings, lots of space. And right away I met my two professors, but Sherry Fowler was the one that I will be studying under mainly. We had a good talk right off the bat. She took me around to meet all of the other professors. I got to meet some of the who will be fellow students a year ahead of me. They had me sitting in on classes and talking with them and engaging in the classes as well. And they seemed to really respect my input in classes. Just everybody seemed really friendly, easygoing, really excited to have me in the program. Always introducing me, asking me about projects I was doing. It was a real treat being introduced to everybody.
How many grad students are in the program? Like
about 8 or 9 master students right now. And then I would say going into PhD, fantastic. Of those 8 or 9 that I talked to, I think only 2 or 3 had an ambition to go into a PhD.
Will there be teaching opportunities, or will you be
There are both RA position and TA positions available. If people don't know what an RA position is, it's a research assistant. So GRA, graduate research assistant, and then there's also a GTA, a graduate teaching assistant. They both come with some pretty good benefits. If you are a GRA, you pay in-state tuition. If you are a GRA, you pay in-state. If you are a GTA, you have your tuition waived.
Right. So what are you able to get? Because one of the things that I think a lot of graduate students are struggling with these days is funding opportunities.
I'm hoping my outgoing demeanor and my ability to really speak charismatically, I'm hoping that allows me to qualify fairly quickly for a TA position.
Okay, so leaving Kansas and going back to LA, you have obviously been rolling this around in your mind for a long time. How did you start breaking this news to the bosses that you love at LACMA?
I walk in to the office and I said, "Hey, Alyssa, I've got some bad news." And she was like, "You're not leaving us, are you?" And I was like, "Well, not right now." And I told her, I got accepted into the PhD program that I applied for. And she clapped her hands and she was like hugs all around. She was very excited to hear that. And she was like, "You would be bored here if you stayed doing the job that you're doing right now." She's like, "We love what you're doing here. And, we think you're an absolute asset to this institution and to what we're doing in this department, but you would be bored and we know you would be bored. And so she definitely said, okay, so this is you telling us you're going to leave. I'm like, yeah, I'll leave. And she's like, how long do we have you for? And I said, well, consider this a 12-month notice. So you still have me for a year. And she was like, nice. Good, then we're going to put you to work, and we are going to work you as hard as possible, and we're going to get as much out of you before we amicably part ways. And everybody, I've been approached by curators from all of the different Asian departments, Stephen Little from the Chinese and Korean department, Virginia Moon from the Korean department, Hollis Goodall, who has been my rock throughout this entire thing. All of my co-workers in the department that I'm currently in, co-workers and colleagues from different departments have also been approaching me, and they're all excited for this this opportunity. They want me to do it. They want me to go.
That sounds fantastic. What scares you about the transition?
So even though cost of living is very different, the stipends they offer and the money that you earn is about half of what you would make in Los Angeles, even though it would go just as far. To put cost of living into context, I would say about a 700 square foot apartment right here, 700 square foot, 1 bedroom apartment costs about $1,600 to rent per month. That's LA. Koreatown. It's one of the cheaper areas of LA, actually.
Okay.
To put that into perspective, a 1,400 square foot townhouse with a attached garage in Lawrence, Kansas, you're paying about $850 to $900 per month. For twice the size, about half the price.
Yeah. And you could even get an apartment that's 800 square feet
you're paying
in Lawrence,
like
and
$500 or $600 for that.
It's even cheaper.
But I'm kind of excited about the prospect of having a larger place, having an actual study room, as opposed to having to sit down on my couch, the same couch that I watch TV on, to study and to work.
And I'd imagine that you have a fairly large, extensive collection of books, like what you see over here on my walls that are spilling out absolutely everywhere.
Books in my own personal collection. And then my fiancée, she keeps a lot of her books at the apartment as well. And she's got another about 250.
So what else are you nervous about? Like even like you as a couple?
We're thrilled for this opportunity to be raising up. And I think the fact that we're going out together and we're really going to be able to support each other, I think, is really make it more of an exciting prospect than anything else. I'm nervous about the amount of studying I'm going to do. I don't know what to expect as far as studying goes. I've done 1 master's already, and I really applied myself there. Mm-hmm. I am nervous about what 2 master's programs, especially from people who know this field inside and out, I'm a little bit nervous to see if I can make them proud as I've made people here.
What's the reason for the extra MA again? Because you already have a master's.
Because my current master's is in East Asian art and its markets. So I know the business side. I know the auction business. I know the galleries. But I don't have a recognized degree in art history. So they want me to do that master's just to get that kind of that foundation on which the PhD can build. Plus, it's also going to give me that opportunity to build up my language skills before I go into the PhD.
Has anybody discouraged you from making this choice?
They didn't want me to go further into debt.
How so?
The biggest motivator was financial. And that I completely agree with. But the incentive packages that I've been offered at University of Kansas have been very, very good. It is.
Yeah, that's like the plight of our generation, I feel like, the national plague of student debt that hangs over so many people.
Really, I think what a lot of people are banking on is for some merciful president to come around and just forgive all student debt.
Yeah. Well,
not currently.
We'll see if that happens.
No, it
I'm
isn't.
I'm
It
not
really
sure if
isn't.
that's really in the
So
cards
the
for
only
us as a
discouragement
nation.
only
We'll
really
see.
came financially. Everything else, people knew that this is something that I had to do, and people really
Okay.
knew that this is something that was bound to happen for me.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that you just told me that the people that you work under that you
Yeah,
respect so much were so enthusiastic about the choice, like it just seems
yeah,
like, oh, well, this is inevitable. This is what people in our field do in order to, be
hmm
recognized worldwide as important in
hmm
this field and leaders in this field that are going to push this field into the future instead of, letting it
Oh yeah,
stagnate or letting
absolutely
it
agreed.
regress or something like that. All right. Well, Michael, what do you have any somebody going through this process right now? Do you have any words of encouragement for people out there who might be listening who would potentially be good PhD candidates, but might be scared to apply for a field like that? Because
Yeah.
I guessed and I got it wrong. I didn't go about it right, but all the things that you've said lead me to understand that you have thought about this in
Yeah.
ways that I never could have comprehended whenever I was applying for a PhD program. So, what advice do you have to people
I
that
would
are
really
considering
search your heart
applying
and
down
really
the
see
line?
if it's something that you really need and really want for the field that you'll be going into. If you do your research and you find that, oh, there are people who have really good jobs that have master's degrees and they are doing exactly what I want to do and they don't have a PhD, I would advise that you get in contact with that person who is doing what you want to do without an advanced degree and ask them how they did it. Ask them to go over Skype and have an informational interview. Ask them to just talk with you by email, talk on the phone, or if you're in the same city, go to them in person and really just ask them and be like, how did you do it? How did you get where you are without having to pour that extra time into an advanced degree? If you talk to them and you realize that an advanced degree is still something you want to do, search the reasons for why you really want to do it. Search in your heart and make sure it's something that is not only financially motivated. It's like, oh, if I have a PhD, I'll get a better job and I'll get paid more. Don't do it if that's the only reason. Instead, search your heart and see if it's a topic that you're
Right.
passionate about and that you're willing to really pour your all into. And if the idea of becoming a specialist in a very minute niche, a very small niche of a field, if becoming an expert in that and being able to communicate that to a larger audience is still something that really excites you, then you might begin to consider what PhD programs are out there. And that's when you do the groundwork, realizing who's the best advisor and what's the best program and where am I going to get the best support and where will I have the best resources available to me.
Yeah, and that's that's like the number one mistake I made
Yeah.
is when I was in a PhD program, every book
Yeah.
that I would read was the best book I'd ever read. And I said, maybe I want to do my dissertation in this area.
Yeah.
And then I would read the next book and I'd be like, this is the best book I've ever read. Maybe I should do my dissertation in that area. So I went from topic to topic to topic to topic to topic, and I was just jumping around, flailing in the darkness with no guidance whatsoever. And I just never could decide. And then a job opportunity came up for me that sort of presented itself at the perfect time. And I was like, well, I can keep floundering around directionless in this program, and I don't even know myself, or I could go do this job that I know I can do, that I can actually grow for a while. So I wound up bailing, and there's no turning back on that decision now. I bailed, and I went and did this other thing. But because I bailed, it led me into teaching in religious studies, and which led into the creation of this show. And so many opportunities arose from bailing on that PhD program where I was flailing in the darkness.
I am not. I feel like I'm very well informed with what I'll be doing in the future.
Well, because part of the reason I wanted to have you on to talk about this was to see if you were flailing. Because I can tell a flailer in the academic world.
from a mile away because that flailer was me, and so I can see the signs.
At least not externally.
And you don't exhibit those signs, so I'm very happy for you. Yeah, the internal storm is bleak and windy. But anyway, Michael, I appreciate your time because I love talking about graduate school, and I succeeded on the master's, and I kind of didn't really find my way in the PhD, but
and if it's okay with you, then we're glad where you ended up.
It's really awesome. Classical Ideas is produced by me, Greg Soden. Music on Classical Ideas is composed and performed by Derek Strybig. You can find his music at www.wearewarmmusic.com. If you like this show, please rate it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email me at classicalideas@outlook.com or find me on Patreon at patreon.com/classicalideaspodcast. Thanks so much for listening.